Welcome to your deep dive on Agile. We're really diving deep into this one based on all the stuff you sent over. You're obviously someone who likes to cut to the chase and stay ahead of the curve, so get ready to turbocharge your Agile knowledge.
Right, we're going way beyond just buzzwords here. Think of Agile as like a philosophy,
Hmm.
a way of working that puts adaptability first and always keeps the customer front and center.
Exactly. It's like that analogy they used in the Beyond Waterfall podcast we looked at. Imagine building a house, but instead of being stuck with the original blueprint, you adapt as you go, based on feedback and anything unexpected that comes up. That's Agile in a nutshell.
And what's really interesting is that Agile, at its heart, comes from this super influential document from way back in 2001, the Agile Manifesto. It's amazing how relevant it still is today.
The Agile Manifesto sounds kind of mystical. Okay, so what's the big deal with this manifesto and why should our listener even care?
Well, it lays out these four core values that totally revolutionized how we think about work, especially in software development, but it goes way beyond that too. The first value is really interesting because it kind of flips the script. It says, individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools, basically recognizing that people are what drive projects forward, not just rigid procedures.
So it's not about ditching processes altogether, but realizing those processes should be helping the team, not the other way around.
Exactly. And that leads us to the second value, prioritizing working software over having tons of documentation. Now, this doesn't mean you just forget about documentation completely, but it highlights that delivering something that actually works takes precedence over creating, like, mountains of paperwork.
It's like they say actions speak louder than words, or in this case, show me the working software. Makes sense. What's the third value then?
The third one emphasizes collaborating with the customer over negotiating contracts. Agile gets that in today's fast-paced world, requirements are always changing. So getting constant feedback from the customer is way more valuable than being stuck with a rigid contract.
Flexibility is key these days. All right, bring on that final value. What ties everything together?
Okay, so the fourth and equally important value is responding to change over following a set plan. Agile acknowledges that change is just a fact of life in any project. It encourages teams to be adaptable and flexible, rather than rigidly sticking to a plan that might be outdated a week later.
So it's about being truly agile in the way we work.
Exactly. These four values create this framework for being adaptable, collaborative, and customer-centered, all super important for success in today's world.
It's like a breath of fresh air compared to those rigid waterfall methods a lot of us have had to deal with. But how do you actually put agile into practice? That's where these iterative processes come in, right?
You hit the nail on the head. That's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Agile projects are broken down into smaller, more manageable pieces called iterations, or as they're more commonly known, sprints.
Sprints, it is. We got a taste of those in that Beyond Waterfall podcast. So tell me, how do these sprints actually work?
So these sprints usually last about 2 to 4 weeks, and the goal is to have something you can actually use, something tangible, by the end of each one. It's like, imagine you're building a car. Instead of waiting months to see the finished product, you build and test each part, like the engine or the wheels, one by one. You get to see what works, what doesn't, and make adjustments along the way.
Okay, so instead of one massive project with a far-off deadline, you're constantly working towards smaller, more achievable goals. Sounds way less intimidating and keeps the momentum going. Plus, I'm guessing those smaller goals allow for constant feedback and adjustments.
Exactly. Think of it like checking the map regularly on a road trip. If something's not working or you need to change course, you can adapt quickly instead of realizing months down the line that you're headed in the wrong direction.
So it's a less risky way of working, and you're always learning and improving as you go. I love that. But I have to admit, when I hear sprints, I think Usain Bolt, not project management. Can you give me a real-world example of how these sprints would work?
Sure. Let's say you're developing a mobile app. Instead of trying to build the whole thing at once, an agile team might break it down into sprints. One sprint might focus on the user interface, another on core features, and another on integrating things like payments. Each sprint has a specific goal and a short time frame, which helps the team stay focused and agile.
Okay, now I can really picture it. But how do you make sure everyone's on the same page within those sprints? How do you keep everyone working together effectively?
That's where agile methodologies like Scrum come into play. Think of Scrum as a framework for managing those sprints and keeping everyone aligned and moving towards that shared goal. It provides structure for how teams collaborate, communicate, and adapt throughout the project.
So Scrum is like a playbook for an Agile team.
Exactly. It helps teams structure their work, plan their sprints, and keep track of their progress.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all the pieces fit together. So tell me, what are some of the key elements of these Scrum practices?
One important aspect is the idea of ceremonies. These are specific meetings designed to keep the team on the same page. But don't worry, we're not talking about your typical long, boring meetings. These are designed to be short, focused, and action-oriented.
We've all been in those meetings that drag on forever and accomplish nothing. So tell me more about these Agile ceremonies. What are they like, and how do they keep things moving?
So these ceremonies are more like quick huddles than those marathon meetings, huh? I'm all ears. Exactly. A great example is the daily stand-up. It's just a quick meeting, usually around 15 minutes, where everyone shares what they did the day before, what they're planning to do that day, and if they have any roadblocks. It's all about quick updates, not those long, drawn-out presentations.
Ah, so it's about taking a quick pulse check, making sure everyone's in the loop, and addressing any issues early on, instead of letting them snowball into bigger problems. Way more efficient than those status meetings that never seem to end.
Right. And then you've got iteration planning. That happens at the very beginning of each sprint. This is where the team gets together to decide what they're going to tackle during that sprint. It makes sure everyone is on the same page, working towards that common goal.
I can see how that creates a sense of ownership and shared responsibility. Everyone has a say in what's important, and they're clear on the goals right from the get-go.
Absolutely. And last but not least, we have the retrospective. This happens at the end of each sprint. It's a really valuable chance for the team to take a step back and reflect on what went well, what didn't go so well, and what they can improve on for the next sprint.
Ah, the power of reflection. A chance to celebrate those wins and learn from any missteps along the way, right?
You got it. Continuous improvement is a big part of Agile. These retrospectives give teams the dedicated time to openly talk about their challenges, share feedback, and come up with solutions for the next iteration.
It's like a built-in system for constant evolution. Love it. But it's not all meetings, right? What about the actual work?
You're right. Agile methodologies like Scrum also include specific practices for defining and managing the work that happens within those sprints. One of the most important ones is the use of user stories.
Okay, user stories, I've heard of those. Tell me more.
So basically, these are short, simple descriptions of a feature or requirement written from the end user's perspective. They help everyone understand why they're building something and keep the user's needs front and center.
So instead of saying something like, implement a password reset function, it would be more like, as a user, I want to be able to easily reset my password if I forget it, so I can get back into my account quickly. It's all about seeing things from the user's point of view.
Exactly. User stories make the whole development process more human and keep everyone focused on what really matters, delivering value to the person using the product. It shifts the conversation from technical details to what the user actually needs, which leads to a better end product.
It's subtle, but powerful. You're not just building a feature in a vacuum, you're actually solving a problem for a real person. I bet that's really motivating for developers.
Totally. And then to make sure everyone's crystal clear on what done actually means for a user story, we have something called acceptance criteria. It's basically a checklist of conditions that need to be met for a user story to be considered finished. No more ambiguity or assumptions.
Ah, so everyone's on the same page about what done looks like right from the start. No more "it works on my machine" excuses. That's brilliant. This whole definition of done thing sounds like a real game changer.
You said it. It helps avoid confusion and rework down the line. Plus, it goes back to that agile value of working software over comprehensive documentation. It's not just about ticking boxes. It's about making sure the work delivers real value.
It's about quality, not just quantity.
Exactly. Now, another key part of Scrum, and Agile in general, is this emphasis on continuous improvement. It's not enough to just build something. You always want to find ways to do it better, faster, and with a deeper understanding of what users need.
I love that. It's like having a growth mindset, always learning, always growing. How does that actually work in practice with Agile?
Well, remember those retrospectives we talked about? They're not just a formality. They're actually crucial for driving that continuous improvement. Taking the time to reflect after each sprint helps the team figure out what's working and what's not, and then adjust their approach accordingly.
It's not about dwelling on mistakes. It's about using them as opportunities to learn and get better.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of learning and continuous improvement within a team, where everyone feels comfortable speaking up and sharing their ideas for making things better.
This all sounds incredibly efficient, collaborative, Almost elegant, even. But I imagine it takes a pretty big shift in mindset, both for individuals and for the team as a whole. It's not like you can just flip a switch and suddenly become agile.
You're absolutely right. Agile is more than just a bunch of practices or methodologies. It's a whole new way of thinking and working.
It really is about embracing a whole new philosophy, isn't it? One that's all about adapting, collaborating, and always being open to learning and seeing change as a good thing.
You got it. It's about shifting from that old, we have a plan and we're sticking to it no matter what mindset, to one that's more about delivering value every step of the way.
Makes sense. So it's definitely not something you can force overnight. It takes real commitment to these values and principles, a willingness to actually do things differently.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not like flipping a switch. It's all about constantly experimenting, learning, and adapting as you go. And, we've been talking a lot about software development, but one of the most exciting things about Agile is how it can be applied to so many other fields.
That's what I find so fascinating. It's not limited to just one industry. So how can someone start using these agile ideas in their own work, even if they're not in software development?
That is a great question. And it's something I really encourage everyone to explore. You don't have to, like, turn everything upside down right away. Start small. Maybe try out one or two of the practices we've talked about and see what happens.
I like that approach. Start small, experiment, iterate. Do you have any examples, like how someone could, I don't know, dip their toes into the agile waters?
Sure. How about trying those daily stand-ups we talked about with your team?
Mhm.
Even just taking 15 minutes every morning to connect and give each other quick updates can make a huge difference in how you communicate.
It's all about staying in sync, even when things get crazy busy.
Exactly. And think about those big, overwhelming projects you might have. What if you broke them down into smaller, more manageable pieces? Just like those sprints, right? Setting smaller goals can make the work feel less daunting and more approachable.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a huge morale booster, too. Instead of feeling stuck in that huge project, you're celebrating those smaller victories along the way.
Exactly. And don't forget about feedback. Encourage your team to be open with each other. And don't be afraid to ask for feedback from stakeholders throughout the project. Remember, collaboration and continuous improvement are at the heart of Agile.
It's creating that environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas, big or small.
You got it. Embrace the iterative process, be open to change, and never stop learning. That's what Agile is all about.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Agile, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners walk away with?
Well, first and foremost, remember that Agile is more than just a buzzword. It's a fundamentally different way of approaching work that has the potential to make teams more efficient, more collaborative, and ultimately more successful. And that's true no matter what field you're in.
It's about being flexible, valuing people over processes, and focusing on delivering value every step of the way.
Exactly. It's about working smarter, not harder, and constantly looking for ways to improve, both in terms of how you work and what you produce.
Being adaptable, efficient, and human-centered in how we approach our work.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And as we've talked about, Agile is not limited to the software world. Think about how these principles might apply to your own work, or even your personal life.
Love that point. Where in your life could you use a little more agility? Could those daily stand-ups help streamline your family's schedule? Could breaking down that big goal you have into smaller sprints make it feel more achievable? Food for thought as we sign off.
Absolutely. The possibilities are endless.
This has been a fantastic deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of Agile. I know I'm feeling inspired, and I hope our listeners are too.
The pleasure was all mine. And remember, when it comes to Agile, embrace the change and never stop learning.